sauce.
But you everyone will play that way from now on. Start.
Okay, we'll call the Planning Commission meeting to order. We'll begin with the pledge to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jess, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Cicero.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Perkovic.
Here.
Mr. Sidoti.
Here.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Here.
Mr. Varga.
Here.
Mr. Snow.
Here. I entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes of the March 28th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Under public hearings this evening, conditional use permit to allow a church at 7671 Johnny Cake. That applicant is asked to have that tabled. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to table item number 1 on tonight's planning agenda without prejudice.
Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Under old business, item 2, miscellaneous review of an outdoor display and the staging of merchandise at 9615 Diamond Center Drive. We tabled that in an earlier meeting. The applicant has asked that that be tabled tonight.
That is correct. They will be here for the first meeting in May.
Okay, we don't need to table that because it's already tabled. Architectural review, reimaging of a commercial building at 7980 Plaza Boulevard. Is that applicant here? Okay, would you come forward and identify yourself for the clerk? I'll entertain a motion to remove that from the table.
So moved.
Second.
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Go right ahead.
Appreciate being able to come back. At the request of the commission, we went back and did a rendering of the entire frontage of the shopping center, which you have up on the screen, and I think you have in your individual packets. Additionally, based on comments we received, we looked to see if we could do something somewhat in character of the rest of the shopping center. So we've added some standing seam metal awning. So we're matching material there. However, because of the diversity of color that's on the existing storefronts, we went with a very neutral, just metallic gray color. That way it's neutral enough to where, you know, when the Giant Eagle reimages, it'll blend in with that. It blends in with the rest of the shopping center. And I think from Ms. Mitchell's report, you can see that the coloration of the paint colors also are very similar to the existing.
Okay. Larry, any comments from the administration?
The only comment would be as long as the P2 matches the existing as it does in that picture there, the administration is happy with it. I would note that although the April 18th staff report does not have any conditions attached to it, we did have 7 conditions from the previous staff report that would be carried over.
Now, you've read the staff report of the previous meeting. Do you have any problem with those conditions that are listed there? I'll give you a second or two if you need it.
Yeah. Brought my copy with me. Item 1, have no problems with. We don't have any outside storage. On item 3, we discussed at the last meeting, our preference would be to go ahead and continue to use the split phase CMU, but we're more than willing to concede and go back with a brick if that be the desire of the commission.
Okay, that's the desire of the administration, right? That's
Correct.
why it's listed as a condition.
We'd like to see something that matches the building that's there now.
Okay.
Be it a split face of similar design. When you see CMU, the way it was described in the original drawing, it sounded like it was just going to be a cement block, which historically the commission has not
Gone along with.
gone along with, viewed favorably.
Yeah.
And yes, the intent is to use the split face because we want the texture there to have something a little bit different than the brick pattern, so that the inset areas stand out a little bit more distinctly. So
Right ahead down the list if you have any other concerns.
item 4, we're good with. Item 5, the house logos, we're good with that. Landscape plan required to be submitted as part of the building permit review. We don't control the landscaping. That's controlled by the shopping center, so they would need to speak to that. And photometric plan, we can go ahead and submit that as part of
Okay.
our
If you'd identify
permit
yourself for
package.
the clerk, please.
Yes, I'm sorry, Jeff Hartman, I'm the property manager for the center, work for the owner of the center. I thought that the landscaping was discussed and agreed to, that there's minimal landscaping there, that it's our plan to maintain the landscaping. But as far as improvements, there's, as I said, there's very minimal landscaping.
So you wouldn't be opposed to improving it to any degree?
Enhancing it, I don't have a problem with. We
Okay.
typically do that yearly.
So we'll be in semantics mode.
Yes.
Enhancing.
We are more than willing to enhance the existing landscaping.
Okay, thank you. Does that satisfy the administration?
The administration was looking for enhancements within the parking lot as far as the existing islands that are there now, putting material back in them. But we also need some material along the building foundation to break up the wall, as we've done in the past with other re-imaging, such as over at the mall.
We do have a concern about the planting against the wall. The sidewalk is very narrow in front there. It's like only 8 feet wide. To add landscaping in there would inhibit pedestrian movement across the front of the shopping center.
Comments back, Larry?
I think that's something that the administration can work out with the applicant.
Okay.
Because in other cases, we've seen it, normally the city has 5-foot wide walks. We're not asking for landscaping across the entire front, but maybe a couple beds here or there to break up the massing
So
up
you
front.
wouldn't be opposed to meeting with the administration on that, would you?
Not at all.
Yeah, I mean, we can work through that, but when you say 5-foot walks, you're talking about sidewalks within the city or sidewalks in front of retail establishments?
Sidewalks within the city and some, in front of some retail establishments. So, we're willing to work with you. It is with these large walls, historically, we have asked for in our landscape ordinance, it actually calls out that we need to have foundation plantings. So we're just looking to have, something in there to break it up. It could be a tree island in the middle of the sidewalk, as you see in some downtown areas, things like that. So we're willing to work with you. It's just we want to make sure we have something there to soften that overall massing.
Okay,
I'm willing to meet with you, and we will address it. And whatever agreement we come to, we'll apply.
Okay. Anything else on your list?
I believe that's it.
Okay. Mr. Varga, did you have a question?
I just have a question, and this is really just for clarification or an explanation. You have some type of awning or metal overhang that's along the face of the building?
Yes, that was the standing seam metal awnings that
Okay.
we're talking about that we've added to
Break
use
it
a
up.
material similar to the rest of the shopping center.
Okay. And of course, I realize the color renditions of these things are always somewhat in question as to how accurate they are. It looks like it's a third color, a different color.
It's a natural metallic finish.
Oh, it's not painted, it's actually a metal finish?
Yes.
Like aluminum or stainless steel or something like brushed?
I mean, actually, it's a powder-coated metallic coating.
But it has a color.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not trying to catch it, I just try to figure out what it is, that's all.
I mean, it's that.
And how does that look with the other two colors? I mean, just, is there,
It's
it's like that? I mean,
Yeah.
it looks very neutral, I'm just trying to get an idea of what it looks like.
This is also the material that we used for the eyebrow canopy that's over the entrance.
I see. All right, that's fine, I just wanted the clarification. And how far does those awnings or canopies come out?
4 feet.
Oh, 4 feet.
So what would that do to the landscaping? If you
It
do
would keep
landscaping?
it, it would
it's
keep it
fine.
dry.
Yeah. So
Like I
I'm
said,
asking-
we're willing to work with them, and once, we'll have them meet with John, the our landscape engineer, or our landscape architect, to work out those details on what can and can't survive there.
Okay, anything else, commissioners?
Sure.
Mr. Sidoti?
Will the improvement of the parking lot occur after the reimaging of the building, during the reimaging, phasing? How you plan to do that?
So the improvements in the parking lot, it won't happen throughout the whole parking lot.
It will?
Not the whole, we're not doing the whole parking lot. So there's an area that was improved last year. We're gonna be improving the area directly in front of the at-home building and various areas throughout in terms of our budgeted spend for the year. But the likelihood is it'll probably happen typically sometime in the summer to the fall. Once we get in the winter, we lose our window to do it, and our windows with 2019 in our budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else, commissioners? Okay, we'll move on for a vote.
I'll move for approval with the 7 conditions.
Second.
Yes, when you're ready.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Under new business, informal rezoning of 50 acres from R4 single-family residential to RVG. Is that applicant here? Would you come forward and identify yourself for the clerk, please?
Jim O'Connor with Polti Homes.
Okay,
I have
go right ahead.
a series of slides that I prepared.
Let me ask you a question right off the bat. Why do you need to go to RVG? Why can't you just develop it as it's currently zoned?
It's a good question and exactly what I tried to outline in the slide. So
I've been
hopefully
looking forward to it.
get a successive build for you. As I mentioned, I'm Jim O'Connor with Polti Homes. Polti is a publicly traded national builder, building in 26 markets throughout the United States. We have over 20 active subdivisions here in Northeast Ohio. We annually build about 300 homes in Northeast Ohio here. And within the publicly traded builders, Pulte has the highest average sale price of publicly traded builders. So we tend to locate all our projects in what we consider to be A markets or very prestigious submarkets, and those are the markets that we like to build in. We've, over the past 5 years, we've sold and closed over 250 homes in the city of Mentor, with that's about $83 million of capital investment into the marketplace here. So now, if I could do the next slide. So, no, 1, 2. So and this gets to your question of looking at a site for its candidacy for a rezoning request. If you look to the north of the site is bounded by destination retail, large-scale destination retail. To the east of the site is high-density residential. On the south side of the site is the highway, I-90, and then there's existing R4 residential to the west of the site, which creates this slice right in the middle to create the perfect opportunity for transitional zoning. Because if you look at a zoning that serves a transition to go from a higher density to a lower density, because if you look at and I describe some of the attributes, what's going to happen is you could say certain people can view things as a very positive aspect, and certain people can look at it as a very negative aspect, depending on what we'll call as the buyer profile. And so certain buyer profiles are very attracted to ease of transportation corridors and access to the highway, and also ease of and accessibility to vibrant retail and entertainment. While other buyers are alienated by those things. They see the highway as a source of noise and traffic and congestion, and they see the same thing with being that close to retail as a nuisance, as noise and congestion. So for different people, they can have two different responses to that, and that's kind of what I wanted to tailor and talk about in the message. So the overall parcel is 73.5 acres right now. It's predominantly an open pasture, and then Next slide. What we're doing is we'll be purchasing the 50-acre site. It'll be a split. There'll be a 50-acre split, and then a 23-acre piece will remain as open pasture. Within the 50-acre site, per the existing zoning, there would be 100 units that under the R4 zoning allowable. In the RBG zoning, it would be 125 units. Our plan would call for 115 units. That's what we'd be looking to do. Remember when I talked about positive and negative attributes and how they relate to a buyer profile? If I could use an example from the car industry, if I talk about a minivan, you can immediately make an association of who's the most likely buyer to buy a minivan. If I say a Corvette, you can make a different association, different kind of buyer. With a site like this, zone for R4, and you say 100-foot wide lots, okay? What that's going to typically demand is a larger house that's targeting an affluent buyer, and that buyer is going to see some of the characteristics or attributes of that site as negatives as opposed to positives. So different buyer profile, a younger, more vibrant, more active buyer would see those attributes of the site that I talked about as very positive, beneficial things that they'd be looking for. So we can understand by looking at a site or by looking at a zoning who would be the best candidate for that site, but we can also look at a site and say that site wouldn't be a good candidate to develop under that set of rules. So as we go forward and look everywhere we look, we say, many times we have to go before a board and ask for either a variance or a rezoning, and many times it's for a hardship. Well, there's certain constraints or certain hardship reasons why we would seek that zoning. In this case, it's more of an opportunity. It's an opportunity for the city to create housing products that attract different kind of buyers, the buyers that would be most likely to purchase in that location based on the attributes of that site. And that's kind of our approach, is not every site is, a 100-foot wide lot, $450,000 plus buyer who is seeking privacy, exclusivity, peace and quiet, and prestige. And that wouldn't be the attributes of this site. So that's why our read is to request for an RBG, and hopefully we'll kind of walk through how we think we've hit not just the numeric numbers of the code, but the actual intent and brought it to life. So.
So what do you see happening with the 23 acres at some point?
We will not take ownership of the 23 acres. The 23 acres will remain in pasture. So the owner will retain that, and we won't have any ownership interest in that parcel.
Okay, so you don't see a future development of that 23 acres?
Not by us at this point, no.
Okay. At this point, is that conjecture at this point? Or you said we don't see it at this point. Do you see it at any point?
I can't speak for the owner, the existing owner of the property. I can speak for us, is that from a single-family standpoint, we've concentrated our activities on the 50 acres.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So, next slide. So we came before, and this is what I talk about hitting the code mathematically. We came before the departments within the city with our original plan, and while it hit the numbers, we got feedback, and excellent feedback, about more of the intent of the RBG and what we could do and make modifications to this to be more closely aligned with the intent of the RBG and what you're seeking with the code. And we looked at, the defining elements of the RBG, the quality of the neighborhood open space, presentation of natural preservation of natural features, provisions for recreational space, and then the clustering of units. So with that feedback we received, we revised our plan and resubmitted it. We eliminated the houses on the east side of the property. We centralized our green space and added social organizing elements off of the walking trail network. We removed the detention in the middle, and then we created a western buffer, a property buffer on the western edge of the property. So the earlier discussion about the attributes, so what this project will do is serve that new emerging buyer in the market that's younger. This is their first move-up opportunity. They're seeking new housing. Many are drawn to Mentor for new jobs. I think the city is doing a phenomenal job with economic development and establishing new employers in the area. And people are looking for affordable houses, affordable new houses in the area. And why send them 4 exits down the highway where that's the only place that they can afford houses? And why wouldn't you do that? Promote housing that would attract them to live in Mentor. And so that's our approach. And those are some of the things beyond it. A couple of big numbers. I mean, this is a $38 million capital investment. It'll probably generate $735,000 a year in new property taxes. It'll generate over $100,000 in new income tax for the residents paying taxes there. From a full-time job standpoint, in construction, it'll be 38. It's the equivalent of 38 full-time jobs a year for a period of 5 years while this is built out. Those are the direct impacts, and then the indirect impacts are the catalytic effects it'll have on the retail across the street. These will be people that'll be shopping and dining and revitalizing the retail across the street. Thank you. So, with feedback from the commission, we went back to the drawing board and worked on the common space. And basically, you can see it tabled out there. We created one larger block of green space with a centralized path that goes through there. Goes through that. There's a gazebo or pavilion structure in the center, and then one thing that we found that has been very popular for us, and a movement that we're seeing across many of the homeowners associations that we work on. There's a community garden there, so the whole community shares different things like that, little vegetable plots, that's right in the center. So it creates a social organizing place where people can come together, catch up, maybe even, have a fire pit or have wine or whatever, and just creates an opportunity for them to engage with each other. That's an 11-acre parcel, and then there's a pathway that goes through the community as well, through the front entrance, so you can continue to walk out and go towards the retail if you'd like. And then there's another path network that goes around what we'll call more of the natural preserve area down towards the brook. So what we've tried to do is create space in common space that has meaning, that can serve a purpose, to bring people together. It's not just a fake extension of somebody's backyard. The idea and goal is for it to have purpose and have meaning. So then I know one of the biggest questions everybody's going to have concerns about utilities, planning, sewer, stormwater. So I'd like to introduce Travis, and he will kind of go through some of the highlights of what we have from a utility planning standpoint.
Hi, my name is Travis Coyne. I'm a civil engineer with Don Boney Associates. We worked with Polti on developing the preliminary plan and doing the preliminary engineering. We did reach out to Lake County Department of Utilities, and they gave us some feedback. And they would like for sanitary sewer to service the subdivision to come from Brentwood to the northwest. There's actually an existing sanitary manhole on the south side of Johnny Cake, and there is a 12-inch stub goes to the northeast. Lake County's requested that we extend that across our frontage. And from that 12-inch, we would come off that with an 8-inch sanitary sewer to service the entire subdivision. And they did confirm that there is capacity in the treatment plant for our 115 houses. As far as water, there's an existing 12-inch water main on the north side of Johnny Cake where we'd be tapping off of and installing 8-inch water main throughout the subdivision. The city, they did request that we bore that connection, not disrupt traffic. As far as storm sewer, stormwater drainage, if you want, you can go to the next slide. Well, this is more of an overall layout, but as far as the more detailed storm sewer, stormwater analysis, that'd be done final engineering. But Polti, as well as our firm, just finished a multi-phase subdivision in Mentor, so we're real familiar with all their requirements and how they like to see the storm sewers laid out. They have some particular requirements in the city here. This map we received from the city. This was part of a drainage study that was done in 1998. City of Mentor did a study of If you look at the area in the red, that's our site. You see a stream crossing from the west to the east. That's Mud Brook, and then a smaller stream going from the south to the north, which is a smaller unnamed tributary, which just takes water from south to 9. The area to the west, Subdivision, directly to the west of our site, and then south of 90, that's the community college. There were some drainage problems going on, so the city did a study of roughly 260 acres coming from that drainage corridor. From that study, they concluded that they wanted to install a bypass storm sewer, and that sewer was installed in 2000. The bypass storm sewer diverts some stormwater drainage from that western corridor in a storm sewer on our western property line directly into that stream. So that was in a 10-foot easement. Prior to that study, there was already a 42-inch bypass storm sewer. So currently, along our western, the center part of our property, the existing 42-inch and 30-inch storm sewer, 30-foot wide storm. So for our project, we've had some discussions with the city, and they're concerned with the drainage in this area still. So what they've requested us to look into is at the southwest corner of our site, drainage coming off of 90 to intercept roughly 8 acres that is draining directly at Steeplechase Cul-De-Sac there. We would intercept that with a drainage swale and proposed storm sewer and route that directly to the stream, which would help with some drainage problems we're having west of our site. Additionally, they've requested that we look into installing a relief sewer, which would be installed also on our west property line from the stream, which would tie into the existing 48-inch storm sewer on the south side of Johnny Cake. That 48-inch storm sewer has extra capacity, and the city would like for us to route some of the larger storms into that sewer to help with any downstream drainage issues that they're having. So talking with Polti, they're totally on board and working with the city to help them with any drainage problems they're having. So the layout that Jim showed you along the entire west property line, we'd have a section that's already a 30-foot storm sewer. We'd have a new 30-inch. If you go to the next slide, Jim's got
Yeah, what I have presented there is these are the comments from the staff report, and it's hard to see in words, so that's why I just did a hand-drawn drawing where we talk about in the green where you're picking up the storm runoff from the highway, you're diverting it. Instead, it was tending to flow northwest. It'll get picked up there. It'll be going due north along the 30-foot property easement. There's two lines that are there. Those represent the dashed lines in red and orange there. The weir will have to get cleaned out right before Ward Brook there. The stream channel will have to get cleaned and lowered 2 feet. And then there is an additional pipe that will run out and connect to that 48-inch. These are the comments right out of the staff report, just brought to life on the drawing. And then one of the other key issues that we're in the process of working on right now is confirmation of the right-of-way access at the second point of egress to the eastern edge of the property right there.
So who are you working that out with?
We actually just did a full title search, presented it to the engineering department here, it's in the law department for review internally, and then, so those are the things we have to satisfy the condition
Okay.
for.
Larry, any comment relative to the length of the cul-de-sacs?
The only concern is if they don't have the access, a second means of access to a public street, we will have a cul-de-sac length longer than the minimum or the maximum of 600 feet.
Mr. Zeman, are you aware that they've been working on this?
Yes, we did receive a copy of the existing easement between the current property owner and Deepwood. Private easement. I mean, that's
Okay. So you anticipate going forward with that ingress and egress off of Deepwood Boulevard?
Well, that would be the intent if it complied with the city code and satisfied the city code, and if not, then we would have to go back to the drawing board, but that would be our intent. Yes, sir.
Okay. Any comments relative to that, Larry?
If, to have that connection from this subdivision to Deepwood Boulevard, through that 100-foot wide easement, that easement would have to become dedicated as part of the overall and improve to the city standards.
So the roadway would be a city roadway.
Correct. Right now, it's not. It's just a private driveway for a condominium.
Is that something you could do?
We would evaluate that, and the possibility of that. We'd look at every possible opportunity for the site plan, but our goal would be we would have to comply with the code, so.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? This is just an informal.
Yes, sir. And I forgot, one other, next slide, comments we received from planning were a reconfiguration of the mailbox kiosk locations, and so we did that with additional parking spaces added to that. We get people off the street. It's actually an element of planning that's behind the technology. There are no more mailboxes at the end of your driveway anymore, and so what we're doing is centralized mail
Where are they
kiosks.
going to put the newspaper?
Right there.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Varga?
Let me just run through a number of things, and then just to kind of go through the whole plan and react to different things I see. And we've had some challenges with RVG proposals, so you're going to have to bear with us as we struggle through some of these reviews. But let me just kind of go from one end to the other, and things I see that need some explanation. The first phase, that section between Ridge Road and the creek, so you're going to need a 30-foot easement that's not shown now.
Correct.
Along the west side. And then I noticed that all the landscaping that's going to be mounded is shown outside the property. Wouldn't that also have to be on the property in order to be maintained?
On the, well.
The eastern border of that first phase section. You show all the landscaping outside of the property line.
Oh, yeah, it could be right on the property line, or we could do it with a temporary easement for that.
Well, I'm just bringing it up that, since we don't know what that property is going to be, I don't know that is a permanent thing. If you're going to do that, it needs to be on the property, I believe.
Okay, to retain.
And then you show a number of water features. Are those features going to actually hold water throughout the year?
I mean, we'd have to look at the soil boring, see what type of soils are in there. If it's, we're required to have some sort of a permanent pool, even if you do a dry pond.
Well, I understand, but based on your analysis, is the stream running into it? Is it going to be a flow of water?
The stream will not run into it. The ponds to the south, those would collect stormwater from.
Just for rain events, but they wouldn't be water features as a regular basis. I mean, they're shown as a water feature, but they're not going to be a water feature.
If they're wet ponds, there will be water sitting in there at all times.
Okay. So at this point, we really don't know. But the odds are it's just going to be a retention basin for storm runoff, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. Then I see then on the Phase 2 section along the west, there is some semblance of an easement. It varies in width, but that would also have to be increased based on some of the discussions we were just having. And then you would landscape the easement, or would the easement be left?
So as of right now, that would have to be determined. So initially, the purpose of the easement was to create a visual buffer between the two, but then after we submitted the plan, and then we got feedback for the stormwater drainage.
Right now, it looks very narrow, and my concern would be about how do you maintain that? If it's only what looks like maybe 10 feet wide in places, but it may be wider because of the
It's going to be at least
other aspect.
30 feet.
So that would suggest then that you may be able to get some maintenance vehicles or back in there. And then let's talk about, there was an interesting statement made, social organizing elements. You want to take a stab at telling me what that is, what that means?
Well, sure. So in the traditional neighborhood design, right? So it's about energizing the street, or not having a community where people just come home from work, I hit my garage door opener, my car pulls into the garage, it closes behind me, and that's it, and then I spend the rest of the night in my house. We want to energize the street, we want to energize the walking paths, get people out in the community, get people engaging with their neighbors, having a place where they can go and talk and do something, sit around, picnic tables, chairs, do whatever.
Great.
And that's it.
And
With a
those,
pavilion.
and those, as described, do relate strongly to the RVG zoning that we're looking at.
That is correct.
But I do have some questions as to how those things display themselves on the plan. And I've complained about this in other sites and other proposals, so don't take it personal. Right now, in between Phase 2 and Phase 3, we have a walking path that goes basically through everybody's backyard. I don't see the value of that. I don't see that as a recreational experience. It certainly isn't a recreational experience for the people who live there to see people walking through their backyards. If this was an R4 or R3 or R2, just as a comparison, that would fill that space, or that where the path is would be in their yards. So I'm just suggesting that that's not what we're looking for in terms of a recreational or social experience. Because I don't believe it provides something that people really want. They don't want to see people walking through their backyards. The other thing is that, and I appreciate what you're trying to do here. There is a pavilion, or a gazebo. I know, I'd like to see a pavilion, which is
yes.
kind of a step up. Maybe some picnic tables, a place that people could actually sit and maybe cook some hot dogs and sit and stay out of the rain if it should rain. But that brings up the interesting part about how do you get to that place? If you live on, say, Lot 5, which is in the middle, you have no direct, I mean, there is a circular path here to get there. But if I'm schlepping a cooler and a couple kids, maybe 3 kids, maybe a neighbor in tow, how do I get to that? It would seem to me that you'd need to provide some kind of, even if it's just a drop-off place, so you could drop your stuff off. And also, the garden idea, I think that's a great idea. It's as far away from people as you could possibly put it. I'm not saying it's a bad place, but it's almost impossible. If you want people to do that, you got to get there. And if you're going to plant planting materials, fertilizer, topsoil plants, you need to be able to get to that spot with some kind of vehicular drop-off. So those are my first read on this. So I appreciate those things. I think I'd like to see the community garden expanded upon. I'd like to see a pavilion. I'd like to see ways for people to actually get to those things, and maybe not through people's backyards.
It's excellent feedback, actually. And as you saw in the revised, that's why I pulled the mail kiosk over into that corner. And these are just sketches, so it's not a revised plan yet, but just elements of that. The idea is to get centralized parking over there and pull those features closer to the parking where that one arrow is. And then we'll also be modifying that a little bit to address exactly what you're talking about, to be able to pull the amenities closer to a parking area and walk from there in.
And I'm not necessarily even looking for a big parking area. I'm just looking for a drop-off and a pedestrian entrance off the street that everyone could participate in these amenities. Because right now, that first phase in front, nobody's schlepping all that stuff to the back. It's never going to happen. So the idea is to make it happen. RVG is residential village green. So the village green needs to be accessible to everybody. Even if it might mean like Phase 2 and Phase 3 might actually have an easement that goes east-west into the space, that draws those people through into an area that's useful to them. Right now, they would have to either walk down the street to pick up one of these, at the ends and then come all the way back or something. So I'd like to see this more user-friendly for the people if we're going to go down this route, and that these amenities are developed further to be useful, because if they're not useful, why are we doing any of this? Well, let's just go R4 or R2, zoning. I mean, part of the justification for changing the zoning is that these amenities become integral and usable. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to ask Joe or Larry, whichever one of you feel comfortable explaining this. Procedurally, how do we go forward with this? It's an informal rezoning request this evening.
Correct. It's just, obviously, it's an information session to the extent the commission wants to provide any feedback, as you've been doing. The next step would be the applicant needs to submit a formal rezoning that will be set for public hearing. And I believe, again, so if there's anything that the commission would like to see above and beyond code requirements, obviously Mr. Varga and other commission members have provided some feedback tonight. Again, it's not necessary that you provide, comprehensive feedback tonight, but that's part of the purpose of the informal rezoning is just sort of give it an initial vetting.
So the applicant comes back at some subsequent meeting with a formal request?
Correct.
Okay,
Mr. Cook is.
go ahead.
I'd like to see the storm be included in the Phase 1, so that that goes in with your Phase 1 construction. The whole western edge be done right away, not wait for Phase 2 to do it. Is that your plan? Right. And then there is no intent to tie on to steeplechase, right? Under no circumstance, even if you don't get this connection over here, that's not being pondered, is it?
I can't say right now. The staff report gave us comment. We're trying to go through and do the homework to find the right access point to that.
Okay.
So,
I think the main issues are the storm water, especially to help the people out to the west here, Hunter's Woods. So if you can take care of that and do as much as you can as screening them, if you have to move everything over a little bit and there, on this site, there's a lot of big trees. I'd like to see you try to save some of them, to create some open space around some of the big trees that are there. I mean, I went here and, can really only get to it from the back. And, man, some of these trees are like 4 or 5 feet around. And, if you could maneuver, I mean, I understand some of them's got to go. But some of the really big ones, that would be a nice gathering point for people to use as a common space. You might have to maneuver, what you're doing here. But other than that, that's really all I got. And the screening to be a 12-month screening, like a pine or an arborvitae. We've got to maintain the privacy that all the Hunter's Woods people have had through the years. We don't want to just slam something up against them. So that's all I got.
and a tree inventory survey is a requirement of the formal request. So we would be submitting a tree inventory survey.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Cicero.
I just want to echo, but maybe a little stronger than where Mr. Varga was. The way I viewed this, it looked like the community area was an afterthought. If we're going to do RVG, I would really like to see it integral to your entire design, not just sitting on the outside of it, where it really is a community space. Mr. Varga's point about these people at the first piece of Phase 1, the way this is designed, they'll never go use that community space. I just think it has to be more integral to your entire layout rather than just sitting on the outside. That's all I got.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sidoti.
Piggybacking on what Mr. Cicero said, I'm looking at this map. Yeah, Phase 1 does appear to be the Orphan Annie parcel. Just appears that way. And they make good points. I wonder how many of those residents will, if at all, come up here to utilize this green space. Now, I like what you're doing with your green space. It's got to be a meeting place, gazebo, pavilion, benches, a garden. That's a good idea. But in this instance here, why can't you bring some additional green space down to Phase 1 on the west side of your new road? You might have to eliminate maybe 2 houses, maybe 3 along that western boundary. Create some open space, some pavilion space or gazebo space in there so that Phase 1 has something a little bit more convenient to their houses to utilize. Create some open space down there. Is that possible?
We'll certainly evaluate it. I will guarantee when I come forward with the formal zoning request, we'll have dialed in many different options and met with planning and gotten feedback along the way that we have, that we've made significant enhancements and it's consistent with what the proper approach would be. I almost said I said the word, but the last planning commission meeting I was at in the city of Wadsworth, when I said it, we are putting together a very similar a community center like this, and I said the words, and we have a fire pit outside, and then everybody's, oh my gosh, who's going to burn down the pavilion and things like that, as it was a safety hazard. But that's, if you look at how do people use their backyard, come on over, let's hang out, let's have a fire, let's talk and interact. And so we would try to do something like that and honor all safety codes at the same time. But I guarantee you, we will have the ability to enhance that community space, to have it serve purpose, to have it create a place that invites people to engage in that space. That's what we want to do, and that's what we'll strive for.
So you know which direction you have to go in?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else, commissioners? Okay. We'll see you at a subsequent meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, last item on the agenda is an informal rezoning of 2.9 acres from RVG to R2.
This is interesting.
Right ahead. If you identify yourself for the clerk, please.
Hi, my name is Dan Sebring. My wife Vicki Sebring. Chris Weinkammer is the HOA president of Queensboro.
So the reason behind your request is what?
The primary purpose is to rezone from RVG to R2.
It's a secondary purpose.
We currently live, look at lot 12 green space. This is if it were to be rezoned. We live right there where the covering over. And we've been working to obtain that property next to us with the HOA. We currently maintain probably about half of it and have for about 10 years now. And we would like to obtain that. There's a second purpose. Chris can speak to that if he wants to, but it is to alleviate the financial responsibilities of the HOA to the green space, which is taxes and insurance, approximately $700 a year. And it is becoming increasingly more difficult in Chris's search for insurance to find somebody that will cover it. There's a tremendous amount of dead ash trees right now that are currently, it's been a really rough year. Half of them are snapped and falling over in that green space right now.
Okay. Commissioners, Larry, any comments from the administration?
None at this time.
Okay. Commissioners, any comments, questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sidoti?
I just have a couple questions. Okay. With the rezoning taking place, should it be approved, the association is going to quit claim these individual parcels that are to be consolidated with the 12 by quit claim deed at some nominal cost?
Oh, I'm sorry?
The association, once it's dissolved, will quit claim these parcels to the individual.
It would be then assigned to the homeowners that abut that. And so there's two clarifications too. The homeowners in the HOA will not be purchasing the property. The HOA will basically give it to the property owners in that area.
When you say give it to them, it's going to be required that they be consolidated with their existing parcel.
Correct. Yeah, so it'll be attached to the existing lot that's there.
And those parcels then will be titled in the name of that property owner.
Yes, they would.
How
Yeah.
are you going to accomplish that? Just through the plat or by deed, or how are you going to accomplish that?
So I believe, and I'm not expert by this in any way, we've been working with Barrington surveyors, Dave Novak, and with a title company. They've, just through those meetings, they've explained to me how all of that would happen. And my understanding, I believe, is a replat.
Right. Okay. You said you had support from 8 of the 12 affected parcels. You know, in order to make this work and work right, it has to be everybody's in, or you just don't do it, in my opinion.
Okay.
Where do you stand with the four that seem to
So
haven't responded?
Chris and I chose one of the coldest days of the year to go talk to everyone, so that was a challenge on its own. But we went door to door and knocked on, all the houses that are abutting all of those sections there. And of the 8, all were on board, kind of saying, it's about time, let's do this. And then Chris put together a letter that I believe I also included in the packet that was given to those homes, notifying them of what we were attempting to do. And
I haven't heard from, actually, it's 9 out of 12. There's 3 we just haven't heard from yet. So they haven't responded yes or no.
Sir, I need you over by the microphone, please.
The other 3 homeowners have not responded yes or no. So we'll follow up on that. Part of our objective was to find out if this is even possible before we get the homeowners association totally involved in this. So I want to get some feedback from the city as to whether this was an acceptable approach.
And I also think it's important when you speak with the other 3, then you
Oh,
get.
absolutely.
Right, and then when you get to 12 together, you decide now up front, you know, what they can or cannot do with these additional pieces being consolidated to their existing property. I mean, if you don't want to see sheds built or stacking of wood or, you know, anything, you got to decide all this up front now so they know going in what the clear intent is.
our intent is not to dissolve the HOA. There was some wording in there that was a part of this.
Oh.
While that could happen in the future, that is not our intent of this. Alleviate the responsibilities to the green space.
And is anybody of the 21, is everybody in accordance with the rezoning change?
Again, we haven't approached the rest of the
All right, so
homeowners
you got some work
association.
to
They're
do.
not directly affected by that, but it seemed kind of pointless to get everybody involved until we found out this was even possible.
Who's paying for all this work? The preparation of the
See-
plat, the survey, the filings? Who's paying for all that? The association?
No.
Individual property owners?
Us that live near Lot 12. Going to absorb all of that just so there are no issues to get in the way. You know, if one person were to say, no, I refuse to do that. It's definitely our project. It's our desire, you know, to see this happen. So we've kind of attempted to look at the cost that's associated. Based on what we believe that will be as an estimate, is that we're going to ultimately allows us to pick up the land that we would like.
I would suggest, before you meet with the 12 property owners who are affected, one question I've seen come up in the past over and over again is you may want to have a discussion with the Lake County auditor, because one question that keeps coming up is, what happens to the value of my property? What happens to my real estate taxes? Is there going to...
That has come up.
That's an obvious question. So you may want to be prepared to discuss that, because it's important going in. If you want to get everyone on board, you got to clear all these, questions up in the beginning. That's important. Larry, I have a question. The preservation plan that you're requiring for the Village Green properties at the rear of sublots 9 and 12, are you requiring that be in recordable form, or is that going to be on file here at the city? What's your intent?
I think the city's intent would be to have some language on the plat to indicate that, basically it's a no-build area. It's to remain in a natural state. Right now, it serves as a great buffer between the golf course and those homeowners.
Right.
That's what the intent of that originally was when it was rezoned, is to provide that natural space in between the two uses.
And it's still the city's position today that it wants to retain that right-of-way that's shown on the map?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Zeman, any comments from the legal department?
No, actually, I think a lot of the the legalities of it were pretty well addressed in the staff report relative to, having to have all the stakeholders in this buy into this plan. But the question was whether it was possible, and so I think they've got a bit of a roadmap relative to how to bring it to fruition.
Okay. Any other questions you might have?
My only question would be, is the consensus then that this is a viable plan and we should go ahead?
I am.
See any major objections?
Go ahead.
Larry, right now, this road just stops, this right-of-way that the city has.
Correct.
I'm looking at this, and the pavement just stops. There's no.
There's a guardrail there. Yeah, you're right.
And there's a guardrail, right. I mean, there's not a cul-de-sac. Is there a requirement for a cul-de-sac?
There is not a requirement for a cul-de-sac at this time, and I would like to clarify, the piece of property the city of Mentor owns, it's not right-of-way. We own it.
Just the property, you own the property?
We own the property. It's not designated as right-of-way or anything.
And then in the future plan, or the plan you had shown, Lot 12 would be split by the city's property, right? I mean, I don't know that you can split it. It'll have to be a separate piece of property, right?
Correct.
And that there's something that I would think the city would want to stipulate, certainly I would want to suggest it, and that is that there be some language in how the rest of this property is subdivided, that we're not doing this to, in the future, subdivide the property again to try to create buildable lots.
It's certainly not our wish. We agree.
No, I understand,
We would not want that to
but
happen.
assuming, you could move away and then someone else could come here and they say, oh, I have all this property and there's a street right away, maybe I could subdivide my property and build another house, and I don't think anyone is looking for that. And the other question I have is, where was this right away going? I mean, it was obviously required at the time this was platted. Where is this going?
I believe the intent of that was to connect over to one of the other subdivisions north.
But isn't that the golf course right next?
It's the golf course right there, but
Driving
in the
range.
70s, when it was rezoned, the golf course was privately owned. The city was looking down the road. Golf courses sell from time to time to be developed.
We're not losing
as we've
anything
seen
by
recently.
we're not losing anything by losing that connection, or future connection. Even though the city's gonna maintain ownership of that piece.
We're going to maintain ownership of that piece should we ever need to have access to the golf course from this location.
And I just remember, then the other question I have is that this is going to revert to R2
Correct.
zoning. When the lot sizes are considered, do they all meet the requirements in terms of size of R2 zoning?
Yes, they do. They fit better into an R2 zoning than any of the other categories that we have.
So we're not creating any hardship or...
The only hardships that would be created, all the lots meet the minimum setback requirements except for sublot 12 and sublot 8. Sublot
That's
12,
just setback,
yeah.
not size.
That's not, yeah, it's just a setback.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
I apologize, I have one other question, if it's okay. For Lot 12, I guess we would just want to make sure that it wasn't entirely zoned as preservation or conservation, I'm not sure. There is potential we would like to put addition on that would go into that space. Is it only the 25-foot that would be preservation from the creek?
I think we would like to see that preservation area be basically from, at a minimum, from the south side of the creek to the north property line, to ensure that they're maintained that buffer area between the golf course and everything.
Just south side.
Yeah.
On the south side?
Of the creek. It would eliminate any development up beyond the creek towards the city's property.
So on that map, to the right.
North of the creek.
North of the creek. In order for them to expand in the northerly direction from Lot 12, they'd actually have to combine Lot 12.
I believe that would be their intent. The city would not leave.
It would be a single lot,
Yeah,
not two
the city
separate.
wouldn't leave any of those as separate lots.
So does that accomplish what you want to accomplish?
Combining 12 and 12A. Conservation from the south side, which is the right side of the creek, to the left.
But there'd be a conservation easement, but there would be single lots. All those 9, 10, 11 would be a continuous property, right?
Correct.
So it'd be a continuous lot, but you'd have a conservation easement on the lot.
Middle of it, okay.
That would keep you from using the back part of your lot, but it would be a single lot. 9 would just be a single piece of property. 10 would be a single piece of property.
Up until the easement,
Right, and but the easement would be on a single lot.
So what do we need to do?
It's an informal rezoning at this time.
Okay, so
Well, just,
we need to answer those questions that were asked earlier with the additional property owners, that type of thing.
Mr. Chairman, just to make it clear, we're not going to be in a position where we'll be able to accept a formal rezoning unless all of the homeowners sign off on it. And the reason is, we can't rezone in a way that would divest anyone of their property interests. And right now, every single homeowner has an interest in these common areas. So if they don't all agree, in theory, you could still rezone it, but then we would be creating a lot of non-conforming lots. They've all got a stake in it, so they all have to sign off
all
on it.
21.
All 21.
That was my point.
Correct.
Okay?
Thank you.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, well, there's a total of 23 homes. Now, when you say one, is that up at Hendricks Road, those two homeowners do not have an interest in this? Or they are part of the association? That's a question.
If they're part of the association, I would say,
Again, the question that we would have is whether or not they have an interest in the common areas. If they don't have if they, via deed, they have no interest in the common areas, then their consents would not necessarily be required, but though certainly, I think, the commission and ultimately council may be interested as to whether or not they want to see their properties rezoned. If they object to really rezoning, that may carry some weight. The real specific concern with even processing the application is that we can't do anything that would divest anyone of a property interest. So if those owners do have some interest in that open space, then they too would have to sign off on it.
I really don't think it's going to be a problem because pretty much everybody complains about paying fees over the insurance.
So you'll be out of a job.
What a wonderful thing.
Okay, so you have your marching orders.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Director's report, Larry?
The only thing we have is I placed on your desks before the meeting the long-awaited PUD Code Amendment. We would like to have you read that over before the next meeting, and we'd like to schedule a work session before the next meeting if possible, to discuss that code section so we can move it forward.
Anything's
Larry,
possible.
could you send this electronically also?
We can.
Thank you.
So when would you like to have the meeting? How much time in preparations for the next meeting do you need?
We're thinking 6 o'clock before, have a work session at 6 o'clock before the next meeting, if that's, works with everyone's
For
schedule.
everyone?
Probably. Yes.
Okay, if it doesn't work for us, get back to Larry tomorrow.
Yeah, let us know and we'll,
If you don't hear from everybody, let's assume it's on.
sounds good. Everyone's waiting for it to get moved forward. Council's already reviewed it and told us we can bring it.
So now we have to hurry up.
You know how that goes.
I know exactly how that goes. Okay, anything else, Larry?
That's it.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Wait, Mr. Chairman, one question, please.
Go right ahead, Mr. Sidoti.
Mr. Zeman, the construction notices we received from First Energy, I believe Mr. Snow got one and I got one,
did.
regarding the taking out of 4 transmission lines and replacing.
I haven't seen that document.
I just want to know if there's anything we need to do.
I haven't seen the document, so I really couldn't comment on it.
Well, I think Mr. Krieger and Mr. Who else got one?
The
City manager, the mayor, and,
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay,
it's on here.
so we need to get you a copy of what we received. Would that help?
Putting more paperwork on my desk would not be helpful at all. But I will look at it.
We can do that.
I will look at it.
Okay, thanks. Anything else, Mr. Sidoti?
No, that's it, thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.